My name is Cynthia Hopcraft. I'm with EcoClean Solutions. And if there's a product now existing that's patent pending, and basically it does have capabilities for self-cleaning buildings, sidewalks, commercial buildings, hospitals, and everything, I would think that would be something that would fit into this program.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And how could I get with you after the meeting?
Sure, yeah. Come talk to me. I'd be happy. Okay. But there are about, last time I counted, 150 inventions that are truly nature-based.
Right.
And it's a growing category. I mean, the state of California adopted a green chemistry kind of model, even though it's still kind of early stage. That would require, forced manufacturers and a lot of chemical to reduce their chemical contents and look at, non-invasive type of agents. So.
Right. The active ingredient in this is titanium dioxide, which is a natural mineral. So it's in many products already that we use every day. So I would think we'd be right in the ballpark. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to give you a heads up, some of the programs I mentioned, these are a handful of things that we're doing. We're doing other things as well, but I thought I would present those. But as I mentioned earlier, this is sort of like a work in progress. I mean, we're probably by July we'll have a finalized kind of strategic plan in terms of exactly which industry we're going to be fostering and going after. And a lot of it has to do with the branding aspect also, which I haven't talked about. But.
Carol Ann Dykes, University of Central Florida Business Incubation Program. We'll have a chance to talk more tomorrow. But as I listened to your presentation and all the assets that you have to work with in San Diego, it's very similar to what we have here in Metro Orlando and Central Florida with the university and the companies. The piece we don't have is the gap funding. I mean, that's the magic phrase that we all talk a lot about and have struggled with. You've done some interesting things in addressing that with the foundation funding, Qualcomm, the city. I mean, our local government's incredibly supportive, but what are some suggestions you have to get local industry involved? And the foundation, I don't know if they are looking to possibly fund other places. They're probably local to San Diego, but what are some suggestions you have for us to address that issue?
Well, I think one of them is to really engage. I think this symposium is really the basis for it, is to engage the local companies, whether they're clean tech or non-clean tech companies. And by engaging them and showing that there's potential for job creation and that the government is really behind it, that's sort of where I'm going with that Clean Tech Innovation Challenge. We're not going to be able to seed this process for the next 10 years. We're hoping that the corporate world will take over and see that this is really an advantage for them. So I would definitely try to find a way to engage the corporate world. Now, there's a number of grants that could be, I mean, especially from the stimulus package, it's sort of the unknown. There might be some money there. We're looking at the same thing. And I think that's the best way is to kind of, what's ideal, I think, is to make the general public understand there's a value added if you're going to do these type of programs, that they may not provide direct economic benefit today, but they will in 5-6 years down the line. And I think you need to create the nest before you can move on. And I think that's sort of what that foundation, it's almost like capacity building, and John and I will talk about it many times, is you need to have some of the traditional economic development directive in terms of land acquisition and assistance, permitting assistance and so on, but you also need to nurture innovation at the start. And that's sort of what this is all about. And this is a discussion that needs to be, repeated over and over. I mean, that was something that it took us almost a year to get that Clean Tech Innovation Challenge up and running, just because the number of institutions that were involved and the complexity involved behind it. So.
My question is related to that one, because those of you who know me all know gap funding is my personal kind of passion. So as we chatted about last night at dinner, the investment size for each of those projects was about $55,000.
Yes, I did not mention it. Yes, yes.
And I did want to clarify the funding from the city, the $100K that's coming in. That's recurring, correct? Or is that a one-time grant?
No, that was, to be honest with you, that was a one-time issue at this point. But I'm working on getting the city to have a special line item for clean tech in general programs, because that $140,000 came from an EDC contract that we have. Okay. So technically this year we don't really have funding, but I have a proposal on the table to not only allow funding for this for the next 3 years, but also funding for the other programs. And that's sort of the battle that we're having right now, because the fiscal situation is pretty tough.
Okay, yeah, so a couple, kind of thoughts. First of all, if it's just one time, then it's very limited. But even if it's recurring, 55, 60, 70K for a project that early in the development cycle is just a drop in the bucket. So my question to you is, there's a big gap between a $55,000 one-time grant on a research project and the time when a company would be potentially attractive to Angel's early stage VC. So do you guys have a strategy, or have you put any thought into what you're going to do to address the capital needs going on after that initial challenge award is given?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, what we're doing right now is the next year funding, we're hoping to raise it to 100K. We're hoping that we could get more corporate sponsor and maybe do less project, maybe only award 2 or 3, but they will have a substantially higher amount of funding. And the next thing we try to do is to try to pair them with some other forms of grants. So we're looking at other ways to get the small business grant and so on, and we're trying to find ways to get additional funding so that when they get the prototyping issues, when they graduate from that program, they quickly move on to the next one.
You're going to manage those programs
Yes,
for a while.
yes. And we're actually partnering with an organization called Connect and some of the other small groups. And Cleantech San Diego also, which was newly formed about 1.5 years ago, which is also going to be a big component. But it's the unknown. I mean, it's the biggest question that we haven't really find the silver bullet for that.
Hi, Dave Broderly. I'm a consulting engineer. Have a company called Clean Power Engineering, and we're focused on life cycle types of issues and trying to find solutions that can work in a marketplace in the energy sector, which is highly subsidized and skewed toward non-sustainable energy systems at the moment. The question would be one of general: how do you define green, and what kind of criteria do you use to make decisions on what are labeled green and where the investment goes? And how do you handle the trade-offs? Because I noticed you had ultra-low sulfur diesel up there as an example of, you use that versus natural gas, dual-fuel natural gas in a bus engine, I guess, or a diesel engine, because it produced slightly lower emissions of nitrogen oxides. But you did that at the trade-off of going to a high-carbon fuel, which is diesel, especially a highly refined diesel, versus a much lower carbon fuel, which is methane, which takes you on a transition to a hydrogen type of fuel, which is zero carbon. And you made the statement that we're going to have a hard time meeting 2050 goals unless we completely change our lifestyle. I guess I disagree with that, because I think we do have the technologies to really achieve significant reductions in carbon emissions on a life cycle basis if we simply have the policy in place that provides the economic stimulus to make the investments in the right direction. So how do you're taking a longer view here in terms of biomimicry and mimicking nature, and one of the keynotes of nature is species diversity. So how do you address these short-term trade-offs versus longer-term kind of criteria, where the NOx is a short-term trade-off versus carbon, which is a longer-term trade-off? And how do you propose to kind of direct investment in public policy in a direction so we get the investment to focus more on the long-term solutions, which our economic system, doesn't reward long-term thinking; it rewards short-term thinking. So how do we change this fundamental paradigm in a way that we can get venture capitalists to invest in the long term rather than the short term, and meet these sustainability goals?
I agree with you. I think it's a good question. I think part of it is, the answer is AB 32, in the sense that this legislation kind of evens the playing field. It's saying that everybody has to reduce their carbon emissions. And that's the standard. The other aspect that is kind of missing, and we look at other countries like Sweden or other parts, when we're going to have at a federal level a cap and trade system, that's going to signal, the financier and so on, so that there's going to be a price for carbon. Therefore, there's a way to find abatement technology to reduce that carbon. I think right now we're kind of in a situation that there's a lot of shortcuts. We could make short improvement over time, but you're right, the biggest transition is the one that takes the longest time. So I think everybody's looking at us, California, in terms of how successful this AB 32 is going to be. Are they going to be able to implement it, and are we going to be able to secure long-term goals instead of having temporary fix? Are we going to move away from hydrocarbons and really moving into methane and hopefully hydrogen and so on? That requires a pretty incredible change. California has the hydrogen highway proposal idea. We have, I think, 3 stations. In my mind, I think if you look at moving forward in the next 20 years, it's going to be a combination of all those things. There's no silver bullets in terms of technology. There's not going to be a hydrogen economy 100%. I think it's going to be a combination of hybrid technology in terms of engines, electrical cars, different variety of energy generation, and so on. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's sort of what I'm expecting the AB 32 will help us finalize. And actually, I'm hoping that the Obama administration and new Congress will work over the next year and a half on a nationwide cap and trade system, which actually will signal the other markets that the United States is ready to take
economy-wide cap and trade, not just smokestacks. Just to give you some positive feedback, City of Gainesville last week approved our utility to do a feed-in tariff or a renewable energy payment, and they're paying 32 cents a kilowatt hour to private sector investors into photovoltaic systems that will go on either greenfields or on rooftops. They had set a cap of 4 megawatts for the first year, and they've already got at least it doesn't even go into effect until March 1st, and we've already got at least 1 megawatt committed. So there's a tremendous interest in this. We've had people coming from all over the world asking to participate. And basically, the way this is being funded is with a tax on all the consumers who buy electricity from GRU. And it's about a 1% right now tax and a fuel adjustment charge. So it's not called a tax, it's called a fuel adjustment charge. But it works. And the key is getting the money into the local community so it stays in the community and the money doesn't get that we tax ourselves to do. We don't want to see it exported to San Diego to support your entrepreneurs. We want to support entrepreneurs here.
And that's the same idea with the Clean Generation Program for obviously it's only residential right now for solar. And also we want to move into energy efficiency and then water conservation technology through this funding mechanism that will allow us to basically add a super lien on your house. That's where you're going to pay it off over 20 years or so. I'm hoping that's going to be, we're doing at a residential level right now, but we're moving into commercial, especially the small commercial. And I think there's a lot of untapped areas, especially in San Diego. I mean, we have so much sun. And the other issue in California is we have 3 major utility companies, and the public utility that we have in San Diego is the smallest of the 3. And in some instances, they're sometimes dragging their feet when it comes to taking on these new ideas because their overall
major investor-owned utility in this state is opposed to the feed-in tariff concept, even though they're the largest renewable energy operator in the entire planet. They're opposed to it in their own home state. So we have some hypocrisy or something going on that basically is holding back progress in the state of Florida that we need to overcome through information. We appreciate your coming and sharing your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.